All right, Grand Rising, everybody watching now or later. Look, we're reading this book, The E-Myth Enterprise, How to Turn a Greater Idea into a Thriving Business. Now, if you've not yet tapped into this, we've been reading this whole, since January through February, and we're in chapter 5. We've been talking about the categories of preferences, and we did the visual ideal last week. Today, we're going to talk about the emotional ideal. Now, I always tell y'all, whether you're running a business or you think you're not running one, you are running a business because you are the chief executive officer of your life. And your gifts will make room for you once you realize that your gifts can be packaged up and delivered in a business. Okay, so that's why we are focusing on building our brands, building ourselves as we build our businesses. And you may be like, yo, I don't have a business. Well, at least you should educate yourself on it, so when you step into the skill set of that you have to share to the world, you can share that business. Okay, but we won't take too much time. Let's go ahead and go straight to the second category of preference, which is the emotional ideal. Okay, now for the review, when you after this video, go to the review, and then I'll talk to you more about the book, and I'll talk to you more about the other categories of preference. Okay, so let's get it going. So chapter 5, the second category of preference. Man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Superman. A rope over an abyss. A dangerous crossing. A dangerous warfaring. A dangerous looking back. A dangerous trembling and halting. Friedrich Nietzsche. That's the person who wrote that quote. Okay. To become an E-Myth enterprise, it is essential for a business to become a visual production. But for the production to have meaning, for the form to have substance, the first category of preference, the emotional ideal, is equally essential, lest the production degenerate into what might be called visual rhetoric, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Is business a form of war? Consider the long conflict in Iraq, fighting in a desert, surrounded by nothingness. A man or woman runs the risk of losing sight, or she is there except to survive. A soldier's motivation becomes doubly important. I believe that U.S. officers involved in many conflicts should make the effort to take the time to sit with their troops, to explain goals, to know every soldier personally, to give them the feeling that they are the best and that their mission is vital. Leadership is not at premium in any war, and without it, nothing will be achieved. It might be argued that the comparison between war and business is an unreasonable one, that war brings with it a special edge and a unifying principle that is impossible to sustain in an ordinary business engaged in mundane commercial transaction where life and death is not a day-to-day question, if a question at all. I believe the opposite is true. I believe that a great business comes so the degree that, like war, it raises serious questions. It brings us face to face with our own mortality. If there are no extra human challenges, it creates them, and it engages with its own resistance to change the desert of its own doubt. It forms its people into squads and companies and regiments and battalions and divisions and determines where the enemy is. It is always within, and launches time and time again into battle after battle. If only to take 1 yard at a time to experience not so much that the land is acquired, although of course there is that, but the extraordinary inner strength that is developed, the camaraderie, the passion that is shared, passed on, handed from person to person, from heart to heart, a sense of purpose, of value, of being as fully human as we can be given our limitations. As fully human as we can be, giving our limitations, our limiting understanding, our limited skill, our limited interests. In his book, The Master Game, Robert S. D. Rope says, what people really need and demand from life is not wealth, comfort, or esteem, but games worth playing. He who cannot find a game worth playing is apt to fall prey to acidity, defined by the fathers of the church as one of the deadly sins, but now regarded as a symptom of sickness. Acidity is a paralysis of the will, a failure of the appetite, a condition of generalized boredom, total disenchantment. God, oh God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Such a state of mind is a prelude to what is loosely called mental illness, which fills half the beds in hospitals and makes multitudes of people a burden to themselves, their families, and to society. Seek, above all, for a game worth playing. Such is the advice of the oracle to modern man. Having found the game, play it with intensity. Play it as if your life and sanity depended on it. They do depend on it. Follow the example of the French existentialists and flourish a banner bearing the word engagement. Though nothing means anything and all roads are marked no exit, yet moved as if your movements had some purpose. If life does not seem to offer a game worth playing, then invent one, for it must be clear, even to the most clouded intelligence, that any game is better than no game. What is a game? The Ropes asks. It is essentially a trial of strength by rules. Rules are essential. If the rules were not observed, the game would cease to be a game at all. A meaningful game of chess would be impossible if one player insisted on treating all the pawns as queen. The Rope goes on to say that the only game worth playing is what he calls the master game, the aim of which is true awakening, full development of the powers latent in man. Most of the people I know are not confused enough. Oh, they would all admit to a certain degree of frustration, doubt, a lack of certainty at how a particularly vexing problem could best be solved. Like how to get Jack to show up for work on time, or how to get the landlord to fix the air conditioner, which, no matter what we say or do, blasts on the coldest time of the day and shuts off at the warmest. But aside from these petty frustrations that manage to bollocks up our day from time to time, to my way of thinking, none of that is what I call true confusion. A true confusion means total disorientation. Most people I know live moment to moment, state to state, voicing their opinions on just about everything, and in process confirming their existence, the certainty of themselves. We all do it. It's a matter of habit. How else will we get on with life? But what I'm saying is that most people I know are not confused enough. They rarely stop to see how little they actually do know about anything. But what I'm saying is that most of the people I know are not confused enough. They rarely stop to see how little they actually do know about anything. They rarely, if ever, put themselves into question. They rarely, if ever, get to the point where they suddenly feel totally stupid. Indeed, they rarely, if ever, allow themselves to feel stupid, because it's not only scary to feel that way, to see how absolutely stupid we all are concerning just about everything, but it's drop dead terrifying to come to face with the dark, deep abyss of how little we actually know. And even worse, with the alarming, unsettling, absolutely devastating fact that most of the time we're not even here. If we were to be honest with each other, we would have to agree that most people are like that. In fact, if we really want to be honest with each other, if the truth were really to be revealed, you and I are like that. Oh yes, we are. We are certifiable dummies. What's worse, we're all mainly gone, absent of sleep, out to lunch most of the time, habit-ridden, doing an automatic dance of someone else's choosing, pushed along from behind. It is my contention that if we have too many stupid answers, not enough questions occupying our mind. A great business makes sure to keep everyone awake. Its customers, its employees, its suppliers, and its lenders. True, it is difficult, often treacherous path to take. Most people don't like to be confused. They don't like to be jostled. They don't like to feel jarred. They don't like to have someone say, "Think," as Tom Watson at IBM was given to do. And they like to have opinions about everything that goes on. Don't we? Don't we all like that? Honest to God, deep down inside, don't we all like to be authorities? On the other hand, isn't there a part of us, however small and timid, that loves to be shaken? For it is that shock to awaken. It is that cosmic rap on the noggin. It is that existential kick in the ass. It is that primordial shout from our struggling old conscience that says, "Wake up, wake up, wake up," that lifts us up out of the ether, that snaps us out of our lockstep, that pins us to the wall of our sleep and makes us look at it, makes us open our eyes, makes us breathe, think, move, come alive. I had a saxophone teacher once. As I mentioned earlier, his name was Merle. Merle was a tyrant, a tormentor. Other than the fact that he was a genius at the saxophone, he had nothing else going for him. Merle was weighed at least 300 pounds. He had a drinking problem too. Not that I ever saw him drunk, though I don't think I would have known if he had been. I was only 9 years old when I started studying with him. But at each one of my hour-long Saturday morning lessons, there were at least 400 of them in all. I studied with him for almost 8 years. He drank down a whole quart of beer. Now, I know he had other students besides me, about 7 every day. That means that Merle drank at least 7 quarts of beer a day for the entire time I knew him, and not once did I see him out of control. The only symptom Merle ever displayed to me of his possible alcohol problem was a broken leg he suffered shortly after I began studying with him. He wore a cast, which stayed with him off and on for the rest of his life. He told me that he had been jumped by 2 drunks in a bar one night. One of them held him while the second propped up his leg between 2 chairs and then beat him with a bat. Needless to say, the leg never healed, and it finally killed him. The leg, not the alcohol, but I really think it matters which to Merle. Merle and I had an understanding. This was the deal. Merle could beat the living hell out of me, not literally, but figuratively, and I was free to quit if I didn't like it. And he exercised his part of the bargain almost every week. He was the most difficult man I've ever known in my life. He wouldn't allow me to get away with anything. If I let up little on my practicing, he knew it. If I played something sloppily or carelessly or thoughtlessly, he called me on it every single time and made me play it over and over and again until I got it just right. Understand, to Merle, just right meant perfect. Absolutely right. And it didn't matter to Merle if the entire hour was taken up with one simple phrase. That's what we do. That one phrase over and over and over again until it fairly flew from our own fingers on its own. To get to Merle's, I take a bus from Anaheim to downtown Los Angeles, then transfer to a second bus that would take me up to North Hollywood where Merle's studio was. It was a long trip, up and back. At least 3 hours of bus riding for every hour of saxophone lesson. But it didn't matter to Merle how many buses I took, or how far I had to come to study with him, or how young I was, or, for that matter, how big a pain in the ass he could be as a teacher. Nothing mattered to Merle but the bargain we had struck, that it was his lot in life to teach people to become great saxophone players, and that people studied with him for exactly that reason. And to Merle, anything I did or failed to do that violated that bargain was grounds for immediate and drastic action. On one occasion, only 2 minutes into the lesson, Merle coolly told me to pack up my saxophone and go home. The lesson was over. When I asked him why, he looked at me in disgust and said, "Go." I never did find out why he asked me to go home that particular day, but deep down in my heart, I knew the reason. It was because Merle knew I wasn't working as hard as I could. Merle knew I had a lazy streak in me a mile wide, and I knew it too. He was telling me to go home early. He was telling me to look at myself, to put myself into question, to ask myself whether or not I was really serious about becoming a great saxophone player. Was I taking myself as seriously as Merle was? Was I keeping my part of the bargain? I honestly can't tell you what kept me going back to get beat up by Merle week after week, month after month, year after year, but I think it was the sound of my saxophone. As it changed and grew and matured, as it became music, its depth, its range, its richness, its dexterity, its power all memorized me. I remember how I would stand, sometimes for hours, in the bathroom at home with the door locked behind me and play the saxophone against the tiles in the shower. How taken by surprise I would sometimes be by the rich, fat sound as it ricketed off the tiles in the walls and out the window, filling me with the most extraordinary feeling of wonder, of connection with myself and the world. How old that sound seemed to be, how alive. Without Merle, it would have never happened. People who work in great companies, E-Myth Enterprises, think about them in exactly the same way I think about Merle. It's a love-hate relationship. An acquaintance of mine who graduated from West Point, earned an MBA from Wharton, and then, as though that weren't enough, completed his sales apprenticeship at IBM. Told me that nothing he had ever done in his life measured up to his IBM experience. It was the toughest thing I've ever done, he told me proudly. Without a doubt, nothing has ever tested me as completely as IBM. I love that place. A friend of mine who worked intimately with Walt Disney said of him, respectfully, he was a monster. No one was ever tougher than Walt. No one expected more of you than Walt. No one rode you as hard, squeezed out the very last juice, kept digging until he found the very last nugget. Once he got it in his mind what he wanted to do, Walt wouldn't let anyone rest until they had done it. They said the same about Ray Kroc, Ross Perot, and Fred Smith, and Steve Jobs and the companies they created. They loved the man and they hated him. They loved the company and they hated it. So it seems that in E-Myth Enterprises, indeed, all companies take on personalities of the people who created them. And that is why so few companies have been successful in their attempt to develop managers onto entrepreneurs. It is because personalities like Tom Watson's, Walt Disney's, Ray Kroc's, Ross Perot's, and Steve Jobs are so uncontrollable. That had to be the reason why Jobs was brought back as the Apple's CEO. They are a force of their own, driven from within, unmanageable, chaotic, solitary, insatiable, possessed, you might say. Exactly the opposite of what it takes to be a good manager. You don't find people like that working in other people's companies for long. That is why the companies they create demand more of their people than other companies do, because personalities like theirs demand more of themselves than other people do. If my saxophone teacher Merle had by an accident of faith taken up business instead of the saxophone as his calling, I'm certain his company would have been mirrored the ones I've just mentioned. And that is because Merle expected more of himself and more of his students than anyone has the right to expect in the ordinary world. In the ordinary world, few people have the right to expect to become great saxophone players. In Merle's world, nothing less would do. In the ordinary world, few people have the right to expect to create a chain of nearly 32,000 restaurants, all operating in an identical fashion with the same rigorous standard. In Ray Kroc's world, nothing less would do. Companies like these often appear rigid from the outside. That's because they live by rules. Walt's rules, or Ray's rules, or Tom rules, or Steve's rules. Tough rules for a tough world, where ordinary people are accustomed to playing. Despite outward appearances, despite the seemingly rigidity of their rules, the true difficult characteristics of E-Myth Enterprises for ordinary people to take isn't that they play by the tough rules, but that they are avid breakers of the very rules they make. The rules are constantly changing. E-Myth Enterprises are constantly and continually rewriting their own traditions. They are continually creating a new game to play. And that is because the creators of these companies are continually asking questions about how to get better. They are continuously rising to their own expectations. They march to the beat of a different drummer, marching to their own inner tune and living to the measure that comes from just around the corner, out of reach, out of sight. They are continually in a state of breaking up and reforming. And they do this as a matter of being, as a way of life. They couldn't do it any other way. But their energy, their creativity, their creativity, their spirit, their drive, their stamina, as essential as these traits aren't enough. If they were, there would be many more E-Myth Enterprises than there are. No, it also seems that E-Myth entrepreneurs possess to a degree that puts the rest of us to shame. The 5 essential skills I talked about earlier. They concentrate, discriminate, organize, innovate, and communicate in a way that puts focus, tension, and order. A presence at the heart of the enterprise that causes it to almost shimmer with ecstasy as it goes the unusual way. It is that shimmer, that brightness, that radiance. Are these words too strong? That almost instantly distinguishes an E-Myth enterprise from all the others, from the inside and from the outside, in the hearts of those people with whom it comes into contact. It is the fact that game is more important to such companies than the reward that excites people so much. But that still is not enough. There is something else about an E-Myth enterprise that endowed them with such tangible difference. And it is that these businesses, these E-Myth enterprises, are created not by business people, not by so-called entrepreneurs, but there is also another way to say it, by children. These E-Myth enterprises are created by the youngest parts of us all, not the most adult. They are created by the part of us that believes that it has the right to expect the world to change, to give us everything we want exactly as we imagine it. Not the methodical part, the dependable part, the reliable part, the responsible part, the grown-up in us all, the part one expects the manager to play. Not the adult who has entered and learned to limit his or her expectation, but the child who wants it all. I think of John Anderson, and I immediately know that it was the child in him who created that 1947 Ford Coupe. I think of Merle, and I immediately know that it was the child in him who expected so much more to come from my horn. At times, I remember he would stand beside me with an obvious impatience as I was playing my horn and actually stamp his feet. That's right, jump up and down, as if stamping his feet could force the sound out of my horn, and I was incapable of forcing out myself. He much wanted to hear that sound. Who does that but a child? No wonder there are so few E-Myth enterprises around. It is because business, as it is ordinarily played, is so unattractive to most children. It is such a dead and empty game. Let me tell you a story of another great business, another E-Myth enterprise. Let me give you a profound example of how the emotional preferences of people would have been so well reserved, and how this quality alone has enabled one business to thrive under conditions that would put most businesses under. Let me tell you the story about a woman named Mary and a vocational school in the field of massage therapy called the Holistic Health Institute. To Mary Connor Brown, settling down was the color of a different kind. Putting it mildly, she had led a traveler's life. From the moment Mary graduated from the University of North Carolina with a bachelor's in psychology, she hit the road. And for the next 5 years, she rarely stopped in any one place for more than a minute and a half. As Mary puts it, she wasn't looking for anything in particular. She was just restless. She had this burning desire to do something, to make some kind of mark in the world, to create an impact that would cause people to say, Mary was here. It took on a physical form, starting, you might say, with her feet. They just wouldn't stop. Shortly after graduating, Mary heard about, sought out, and immediately joined the commune in Virginia called Twin Trees, which was built on the principles of B. F. Skinner's Walden 2. There, Mary alternately worked on the construction team as a plumber, the kitchen team as a cook, the child care team as a surrogate mother. Mary remembers the commune as a powerfully transformational experience. It was true matriarchy, created by women, for women, a place where for the first time in my life, it became abundantly clear to me that I could damn well do anything I wanted to. Here I was working as a plumber, for God's sake, when just a few months before I could have told you the difference between a pipe wrench and a hammer. At Twin Trees, my restlessness, what I thought at the time as my search, became focused less on the question of what to do with my life than on what do I want to do with my life. The realization that there was a huge difference between those two questions opened up a whole new world to me. It wasn't long, however, before Mary discovered that despite its lofty ambitions, Twin Trees has become its own sort of prison. A place so charismatic, so seductive, yet so oppressive that she knew she had better get out. As Mary tells it, it was incredible for me to discover how powerful a hold the commune had on me. The very thing that empowered me there began to control me. It was like a narcotic. Something in me told me that if I stayed much longer, I would find it difficult, if not impossible, to leave. The very next day, I literally escaped into a visitor's car by hiding on the floor behind the driver's seat. The guy was shocked to find me there, but agreed to drop me off 60 miles away in Virginia Beach. Why I chose Virginia Beach is still a mystery to me. I think it was the only place that came to mind. It amazes me to this day. In only a couple hours, my entire life had completely changed. Here I was at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon in a strange town with no identity, no job, no place to live, only $18 to my name, and absolutely no idea of what I was going to do next. I loved it, and I was scared shitless. It was like waking up on a strange planet. The very afternoon, Mary rented a $15 a week room in a boarding hotel, and with only $3 left to her name, began hustling survival money, doing odd jobs on the streets of Virginia Beach, wondering what the next step in her odyssey would be. The street became another first for Mary. Her resilience and resourcefulness were tested over and over again. Unlike home, college, and the commune, there were no rules on the street, no ritual to which Mary had to conform. No one told her what she had to do, or that she had to do anything. She made it up as she went along, creating her own rules, her own aims. Every day became an opportunity, a new problem. If she was good or lucky, she got to work. If she wasn't, she didn't. A fast student, she learned quickly the difference between the two. It quickly became a practice. It gave her something of value to teach. She was developing her style. A company is only as alive as its people. The vitality of the product of a company, what it sells, its commodity, always reflects the emotional vitality of its people. Put more directly, dumb commodities are created by dumb people. I think it is also true that commodities mature, become dumber, not only as they outwear their usefulness, for example, their perceived value to the customer, but as the vitality of the people who create them wanes, disintegrates, becomes less intense, less joyful. On the other hand, the emotional vitality of a company's people is always a function of the emotional vitality of the founder or CEO of that company. An old Sicilian expression, "the fish stinks from the head down," tells us where one should look for the failure of a company to thrive. It's a reliable axiom that dead CEOs create dead companies. CEOs who are satisfied with themselves create self-satisfied companies. Dull CEOs create dull companies. Belligerent CEOs create belligerent companies. Adventurous CEOs create adventurous companies. Fearful CEOs create fearful companies. What goes around comes around. Most companies fail because there is something missing, some key and critical component left out. The CEO is adventurous but lazy, so the details don't get worked out. The CEO is passionate but stupid, so there is force but in the wrong direction. The CEO is dissatisfied with himself or herself, but places blame on his or her people instead. So the search turns into a witch hunt. Or the CEO is a genius but crazy, so the energy of his or her genius is transformed into a stew pot of confusion. Consider this. If you want to understand Steve Jobs, look no further than Apple. If you want to understand Howard Schultz, take a good look. Long look at Starbucks. Conversely, look at Apple to understand Jobs. Look at Starbucks to understand Schultz. What's great about these CEOs is what's great about their companies, and vice versa. This game we call business is a delicate, yet highly connected thing. For the next 4 years, Mary Brown stumbled upon one adventure to another, moved more by instinct than anything else. A stranger on the street got her job in a beer bar, slinging studs. A chance encounter in the bar turned into a roommate, and a relationship aboard a 35-foot sailboat aptly named Chance Encounter, in which she and her new friend sailed to the Bahamas, the Virgin Islands, the Florida Keys, and the Tortugas, working as they went, diving for conch, chartering out, or whatever showed up. As Mary describes it, whatever happened, happened. Something in me craved experience, new expressions, new impressions. Somehow I knew that the only way I would grow was if I let go of my past and walked wingingly into the unknown. An unforeseeable and uncontrollable future. What's most true of that time in my life is that I simply allowed events to shape me. I was smart enough to know that I didn't know enough to shape events. It's not that I was fearless, as a lot of people think when I tell them about those times, but that I simply made room for my fear and I established a working relationship with it. It was during the freewheeling time that Mary's school was born. Who can say why things happen? Who can say where anything begins? But it's instructive to try. It's of value to look for origins, beginnings, where things begin to go off or on track. For it is undeniable that every single thing, every event, every condition has its beginning, was started, or was born, or was ignited at some single point in time. Whether or not we know when, where, or why, or it did happen, it did start, and it did come together. But the most instructive origins are not in the past. They are happening right now. New things, new ventures, new companies, new lives are continually beginning. At this very instant, in this microsecond, in this flash of contracted time, something new is setting its foot down a totally new path. It's suddenly decided. It's charging its course. It's creating a future of what will also become past and present events, each existing on the very edge of future instants, future beginnings, and future endings. It is in the miracle of occurrence, this living moment, that everything begins, that everything ends. Even business as they have begun and ended for all time. So I think that Tom Peters was wrong. It is not the pursuit of excellence that matters. It is that we are pursued by excellence. It is that the question of excellence resides as a possibility in everything we do. It is not that the gas station is clean that's important. It is that somebody was possessed by the need to clean it. It is the fire of the heart. It is the fire at heart of life itself. This excellence that either possesses us or not. And it is this instant that it happens, not in the past, not in the future, but at the very instant of choice, now, as our businesses, as our very lives are being shaped. What concerns me, what should concern us all, I think, is how few of us seem to be available or willing to be possessed. It is astonishing to think that Mary's business was started with a book about massage and a handful of clients, both of which, the book and the clients, were given to Mary by a massage therapy friend who decided to leave town. Mary read the book and massaged the clients, and thus her school was born. How Mary Brown came upon the idea for her school isn't important. You couldn't replicate it even if you wanted to. The simple matter is that she was passionately seeking for something, and she found it. Don't misunderstand me. It wasn't the school she was seeking. The business never was. Not for Disney, not for Kroc, not for Smith, not for Parrott, not for Jobs, not for Mary. No, the business is simply the medium through which such people hope to find what they're looking for. For Mary Brown, the school was, and still, a mirror, a reflection of her true self. She sees herself in it every single day. It is a product of who she is. It is a continual commentary of what she has learned and on what she hasn't. It is like the streets of Virginia Beach, a difficult place to go to sleep. Several years ago, Mary, like all other owners of vocational schools with student aid programs in her state, was peremptorily notified by the state that rules for such schools were about to change. Changed, however, is too mild a word for what the state had in mind. What the state had in mind was a revolution. This revolution was going to take place immediately, and anyone who didn't comply immediately with the state new rules would be found in violation and can be put out of business. The state had decided to create a new game, a game called Try This One On for Size. Just a few examples. What the state said was that such schools could no longer pay their sales staff commissions for enrollment until the students they enrolled graduated from school, forcing schools to create a totally new compensation system for their new salespeople, at great additional expense to the school, and take the risk of losing all their sales staff at the same time. The state didn't care. What the state said was that any student on financial aid had the right to drop out of school at any time and receive a full pro rata refund of his or her unearned tuition, forcing schools to rethink their entire financial strategy, their capital requirements, their financial aid programs, without any data to support their conclusions. The state didn't care. What the state said was that the school had to begin to guarantee at least 70% of its graduating students would be fully employed in the field for which they were trained within 6 months of graduating, or the school would be in default. Could you imagine what would happen to state universities and colleges if all the same rules applied to them? That all psychology students who had received financial aid had to be employed as psychologists within 6 months of graduation, that all music students who had received financial aid had to be employed as musicians within 6 months of graduation, that all teaching students who had received financial aid had to be employed as teachers within 6 months of their graduation, and that all engineering students who had received financial aid had to be employed as engineers within 6 months of graduation? Do you suppose state schools could ever survive under these rules? Could your business? What if the state required you to guarantee your product or service? What if the state demanded you to provide your people with a guarantee of success when you hired them? What if the state told you how much capital your business needed to have in a relationship to your revenue in order for you to be permitted to stay in business? What if the state told you what your net profit needed to be in order for you to be permitted to stay in business? What if the state told you what you could say and what you couldn't say to your customers in your marketing process for you to be permitted to stay in business? Well, the state said these things and much more to the vocational schools doing business there. But what the state didn't say was how it came to these brilliant conclusions. Instead of what the state did was to shove dozens of small vocational schools to the very brink of financial disaster and put many others out of business. As you might imagine, most of the schools, small and large, were simply unprepared and therefore unable to comply. But on the very day where all schools were expected to be in compliance with only 2 weeks' notice, Mary's school had fulfilled every single requirement imposed on it. She had done the impossible in record time. Mary was able to accomplish the impossible in record time because her school possessed something a few businesses possesses. The people who worked for her, brought from her, sold to her, and loaned her money loved her and the school she had created. They thought she was incredible, and the simple truth of it is, they was right. Mary had created a wonder out of nothing. Her school was started in a small, shabby house with 6 students, no capital, and absolutely no business experience of any kind. But she knew about people and what it took to survive on the streets. More importantly, she knew what she wanted to teach her students more than a skill. She wanted to teach them what she had learned. She wanted to teach them what she had it. She wanted to teach people that it was possible to have work they love and to have it on their own terms. But she also wanted to teach people to make it on their own, to become independent of the system, to grow, expand, and thrive. And she had to take risks, and she had to test themselves, as she had, without any certainty or any guarantee whatsoever that the end would justify the means. Mary was afire with her convictions and absolutely inspired by what she had to do. And what she was about to do was learn. There were 7 rules Mary learned about building an emotionally vital business. The first rule Mary learned is that people need order. They need to know that there is a structure, a logic, a foundation, a clear set of standards, of principles, of fairness about the business and the job they are there to do. The second rule Mary learned is that people need to feel heard. They need to know that their contribution is important, that no matter where they stand in relationship to the business, as employee, as customer, as supplier, as lender, that what they want matters, and that there is a channel through which they can express what matters to them, and which that channel is always open. The third rule Mary learned is that people need to feel connected to something bigger than themselves. If the business has small aims, it is simply interested in surviving and staying in business. It will not sustain them. It will not touch them. It will not engage them. No, the business has to take on something, no matter what kind of a business it is, in an important way. It has to be willing to tilt at windmills. The bigger, the better. People are dying for want of something larger in life to believe in, to rally around, to support. Could that be why young men and women volunteer to serve in the armed forces, even in the times of war or unrest? The fourth rule Mary learned is that people need to have a purpose. They need to have a plan. They need to be going someplace specific in a specific amount of time. Without a purpose, people begin to wallow. They become suspended in time. They become a drag on each other, begin to feel victimized, lose track of time, go to the movies and forget what they've seen. The fifth rule Mary had learned is that people need to feel that what they are doing has moral weight. The business has to be concerned about what is right for themselves, what is right for others, and what is right for the world. The business has to operate with conscience. Without conscience, a business is a drag on what little self-esteem people already possess. The sixth rule Mary learned is that people need to feel that what they personally do is important. They need to feel that the enterprise, without them, somehow wouldn't matter as much. That when they walk in the door, something vital is added to the business. Something only they can bring to the table. They need to feel as if they are no longer there, the business wouldn't be the same. The seventh rule Mary learned about the emotional health of business is that people need to feel that the people they associate with love them. That no matter what, people care. The words of a student of Mary Brown's wrote expressed it all. Mary C. Brown, what a lady. She beats my brain out daily. She's rough, she tough, but she knows her stuff. And she can charm the socks off a baby. I love you, Mary C. Brown. Mary C. Brown, what a lady. She beats my brain out daily. She's rough, she's tough, but she knows her stuff. And she can charm the socks off a baby. I love you, Mary C. Brown. So, the author has a summary of chapter 5, the second category of preference, the visual ideal. And I'm going to read it for you. The second category of preference is the emotional ideal. There are 7 rules that will help you build an emotionally vital enterprise. People need order. They need to know that there is a structure, a logic, a foundation, a clear set of standards, of principles, a fairness about the business and the job that they are here to do. People need to feel heard. They need to know that their contribution is important, that no matter where they stand in a relationship to the business, as employers, as customers, as suppliers, as lenders, what they want matters. That there is a channel through which they can express what matters to them, and that channel is always open. People need to feel connected to something bigger than themselves. If the business has small aims, is simply interested in surviving and staying in business, it will not sustain them. It will not touch them. It will not engage them. No, the business has to take on something, no matter what kind of business it is, in an important way. People need to have purpose. They need to have a plan. They need to be going someplace specific in a specific amount of time. Shoot. Without a purpose, people begin to wallow. They become suspended in time. They become a drag on each other, begin to feel victimized, and lose track of time. People need to feel that what they are doing has moral weight. The business has to be concerned about what is right for themselves, what is right for others, and what is right for the world. The business has to operate with conscience. Without conscience, a business is a drag on what little self-esteem people already possess. People need to feel that what they do personally, people need to feel what they personally do is important. They need to feel that the enterprise, without them, somehow wouldn't matter as much. That when they walk in the door, something vital is added to the business. Something only they can bring to the table. They need to feel that if they were no longer there, the business wouldn't be the same. 7. People need to feel that the people they associate with love them. That no matter what, people care. Some of you might argue that the emotional ideal is not as important as the great products, great services, and competent management. Trust me, it is at least as important. Chapter 5, the second category of preference, the emotional ideal. So this concludes the reading of the E-Myth Enterprise, How to Turn a Great Idea into a Thriving Business by Michael E. Gerber. Like I've stated many times before, 6 years ago, when I was launching my mobile personal training business, I actually read this book and it transformed my philosophy on what business meant. And ever since then, I started to operate these same laws, these same suggestions, and now it has become something much more beautiful. So, you have just now tapped into the Holistic Book Club, part of the Holistic Lifestyle Tribe, which is a community that supports healers and seekers. As you read from this chapter, once you become a seeker for something bigger than yourself, you're going to step into the gifts that you have, and then that business almost builds itself as you build yourself. So what I've created is a mastermind for those seekers and healers and teachers and coaches to come together to grow, to build themselves and learn from each other. One of the pillar parts is continuous improvement, and we do that through our holistic book club. And we're on chapter 5. Every chapter comes with a chapter review. I've made them available on the application that is offline, where you can get access to all the book reads, the PDF, and the reviews. So it's like, listening, and it's like studying a book. And then if you want to come discuss the book, come to Rising Prime, a daily rising session where you can get in the room to start your day in a positive way. So we have mental health check-in. We've been journaling all week with journal prompts so you can see where you're at, so you can grow to where you want to be. So check on yourself so you don't wreck yourself. Check yourself so you don't wreck yourself. And then we do mindful movement. We do Qigong. These Qigong exercises helps bring your mind and body at ease. Release certain stuck emotions that's housed in your body. Your issues are stuck in your tissues. So we do Qigong. And then followed by personal development. This is the personal development. And we have many different subjects. How do you live the holistic lifestyle? How do you build your brand? How do you build yourself? How do you communicate? How do you be more zen? How do you overcome stress and anxiety? All different subjects we talk about daily. And then we bring all of that, manifest it with powerful affirmations. But what matters most is that everybody that walks in this room is part of it. They're part of a community, a tribe. Find your tribe so you're able to express what you're growing through. Express what you're working on. Share your business idea, right? Build hype for your business. Have people to support you. All of that is included underneath a monthly membership of a support system. Now, some people say, I can't wake up every day for Rising Prime. Fine. All of it is recorded. You have access to the recordings. You have access to way more content than just the live events. So I give you a whole lot more. So within the app, it's pretty much your holistic resource tool. So once you go in the app, you can almost learn about everything. So if you want access to Rising Prime, the holistic book club, you want access to the detox that we do every season, all of it is access underneath the Holistic Lifestyle Tribe. Just make sure you go to holisticlifestyletribe.com. Once you go to holisticlifestyletribe.com, you're going to get access to the daily Rising Prime session. Okay, so you want to be able to get access to all those things I just shared to you about. So don't just listen to the book, go into the chapter review of the book, go into the continuous education, the continuous rising empowerment that we have, and get access. And guess what? You don't have to pay for this right now, today. You just try it out for 7 days. So I have a free 7-day trial for anybody watching who you said, man, this was a great book review. I want to stay in this community. I want to keep growing. I want to build myself, heal as I build my brand and business. Okay, well, the Holistic Lifestyle Tribe is for you. I feel like a lot of people are not going to join because they feel, I can't come, I don't know if I can make it, or they're afraid of investing in themselves. And a month go by, 2 months go by, 3 months go by, they still wake up late, they still have no routine, they still have no way to calm down their anxiety, they're still anxious and stressed, and they have not even tapped into this because they're afraid of showing up to a Zoom meeting, right? Or they're afraid to dedicating. I don't want you to be that person. Right, so we want to be 3-5 years from now. I want to say, like, man, I've known you for a while. We've grown so much. Look how we've grown, and we want to keep empowering one another. So you can just be outside looking in, contemplating whether or not you should be part of this, or you could just partially engage, just come out to the free stuff, or you can actively say, I'm going to make a decision that I'm going to grow alongside this community, the Holistic Lifestyle Tribe, and then. When you become part of the mastermind, it really does help you master your mind. And now you're connected to powerful beings every single day you can collab with, work with. And the relationships you build are now way more powerful than the money you invested. Right? You don't realize how powerful it is to do that, to build those relationships. Because it could take you to a whole nother level. So, join the Holistic Lifestyle Tribe. Go to holisticlifestyletribe.com or text the word tribe to 561 510-9605. All right, so that's my message, and I'm sticking to it, y'all. Stay blessed. You too.